Picture a billionaire right now.
Yeah.
What is the immediate image that comes to your mind?
Right. It is usually a very specific caricature of wealth.
Exactly. For most of us, it's a massive 3-story super yacht anchored off the coast of Monaco.
Or a sprawling gated estate in the hills.
Yeah, with a dozen luxury cars parked out front, or maybe a private jet idling on a tarmac.
Ready to whisk them away to a private island at a moment's notice.
Right. It's the accumulation of stuff on a scale that completely defies comprehension. But now I want you to take that image and I want you to just completely shatter it.
Shatter it completely.
Picture instead a man who has all of those resources, but actively, aggressively rejects all of that consumption.
It's hard to even imagine.
We're talking about a billionaire who intentionally owns virtually no heavy physical assets.
None.
A man who wears the exact same uniform of black clothing every single day.
Just black clothes day in and day out.
Someone who willingly subjects his body to freezing ice baths, who vehemently refuses a simple cup of coffee or a piece of sugar.
And deliberately crushes 300 push-ups and 300 squats before most people have even reached for their phones to check their morning notifications.
Yeah, it's intense. So today, we are immersing ourselves in the mind, the philosophy, and the highly unusual daily habits of Pavel Durov.
The enigmatic founder of VK and Telegram.
Very same. He's a man who frequently gets dubbed a Techno-Monk.
And when you look at how he lives, it's really not hard to see why.
Not at all.
There really is a striking contrast to the standard Silicon Valley narrative, isn't it?
It totally flips it on its head.
The stack of source materials we're drawing from today offers a truly fascinating, multidimensional look at the man.
We've got a lot to get through.
We really do. We're pulling from detailed breakdowns of his daily lifestyle choices and deep philosophical analyses of his public statements.
Right, and highly specific records of his day-to-day habits and corporate structuring.
And when you lay all of this out on the table for our deep dive today, it paints a picture of an individual who operates on a completely different psychological wavelength than almost any other tech titan operating today.
Totally different.
It's not just a few quirky life hacks, it's an entirely different operating system for human existence.
And let's set the terms of engagement right out of the gate here. The mission of our deep dive today is absolutely not to convince you to delete your entire digital footprint.
Please don't do that.
Right, or throw away your television and buy a one-way ticket to Dubai to live in monastic silence. That's not what we're doing.
No, definitely not.
Instead, our goal is to extract his underlying operating principles. We want to deconstruct his fundamental rules for intellectual independence.
Examine his framework for extreme physical discipline.
Exactly. And figure out his secrets for maintaining a level of deep, unbreakable focus that allows a tiny team to run a global communications empire.
And taking a step back, the reason you should care about this, the reason this is deeply relevant to you, even if you never plan to build a tech company, is the environment we are all currently forced to navigate.
That's a rough environment out there.
We are living through an era of unprecedented information overload.
We are utterly surrounded by algorithmic groupthink.
Manufactured outrage.
And endless, finely tuned digital distractions that are designed in laboratories to hijack our attention.
Yes, his radical monk mode protocol provides a highly compelling, albeit extreme blueprint for pushing back against that.
It's a framework for reclaiming your cognitive bandwidth and achieving a thriving, truly sovereign life.
A sovereign life, that's a heavy term.
It is, but it perfectly encapsulates the engine powering everything he does. Let's start by looking at his foundational drive, because everything else stems from this.
The ice baths, the fasting clothes.
All of it stems from this one core philosophy, which is radical independence.
Looking at his trajectory, he has built his entire life around an absolute refusal to be controlled.
Not by governments.
Not by massive corporations.
And surprisingly, not even by the standard investor class that usually pulls the strings in the tech world.
That refusal is absolute. You see it manifest most clearly in how he approaches his physical presence in the world through what is called geographic arbitrage.
Geographic arbitrage, right?
He is essentially stateless by choice. The materials detail that he holds citizenships in places like St. Kitts and Nevis, the United Arab Emirates, and France.
He operates as a legal citizen of the world.
Exactly. And this isn't just about collecting passports for convenience. It's a deliberate strategy to align his physical location with his internal values of freedom and privacy.
He goes exactly where he is treated best.
And more importantly, where his platforms can operate without legislative interference.
Which makes sense when you look at his history. To understand this need for geographic fluidity, we have to look back at his departure from VK.
the massive social network he founded in his 20s.
Right, which essentially functioned as the Facebook of Russia. Now, just looking at the historical timeline here, and to be perfectly clear, we are strictly reporting on the events as they played out in the source material.
We are not taking any sort of political stance or endorsing any side of the complex geopolitical issues involved. We are just conveying the facts from the sources.
Exactly. So, according to the historical record, he was faced with a massive ultimatum. He was pressured to hand over user data and to crack down on specific opposition pages operating on VK.
And this is where we see the psychological mechanism of the sovereign core in action.
The sovereign core. Let's break that down for the listener.
Building a sovereign core means that your decisions in high-stress environments are dictated entirely by your internal compass of values,
Rather than by tribal identity politics or societal expectations.
or the desperate need for self-preservation at the cost of your morals. When that massive external pressure mounted regarding VK, the standard corporate playbook would be to compromise.
To negotiate to keep your comfortable position as a wealthy CEO.
Right. But his sovereign core dictated otherwise. He chose to walk away from the company he built rather than comply with demands that violated his stated principles of user privacy.
But wait, walking away from a massive company requires a serious safety net. You can't exactly maintain a sovereign core if you're dead broke and desperate.
That is very true.
You need resources, but you have to acquire them in a way that doesn't just put a different leash around your neck. I was reading about his approach to funding Telegram, and it completely circumvents the traditional Silicon Valley model.
Completely circumvents it, yes.
He self-funded the initial creation of Telegram, using the capital he acquired from selling his remaining stake in VK. He explicitly aggressively avoided traditional venture capital.
Which is a profound structural decision. Traditional venture capital is the lifeblood of modern tech, but it comes with incredibly restrictive strings attached.
Massive strings.
When you take VC money, you are giving up board seats. You are taking on fiduciary duties that legally require you to pursue hypergrowth.
You are inviting immense pressure to monetize the platform quickly.
Which almost always comes at the expense of the user experience. By entirely sidestepping traditional equity investors, he ensured he wouldn't be beholden to a board of directors demanding that he plaster Telegram with targeted ads to hit a quarterly earnings target.
I know later on he did need outside capital to scale the infrastructure, but even then he didn't sell equity. He used debt instruments, right?
Yes, things like the Graham bonds.
Right, the Graham bonds.
Instead of selling shares of his company, which dilutes his control and voting power, he issued bonds. These are essentially financial IOUs.
The investors get a promised financial return over time, but they get absolutely zero say in how he runs the architecture of Telegram.
His financial autonomy was explicitly engineered to guarantee his operational autonomy.
It really highlights the fundamental difference between a mercenary founder and a missionary founder.
That's a great way to put it.
A mercenary builds a product to flip it. They build it to get acquired by a bigger fish or to pump the valuation for a massive IPO cash out and buy that yacht we talked about earlier.
But his operational style is entirely missionary. Telegram wasn't built to be flipped.
It was built to solve a very specific, deeply personal problem that he experienced firsthand, which is the critical need for secure, uncensorable human communication.
And if you look at the strategy behind it, having those unshakable convictions actually serves as an incredible, almost unassailable business advantage.
How so?
Well, when you take a massive regulatory challenge like a government demanding encryption keys and you publicly refuse, you turn a legal headache into a global narrative about human freedom.
Oh, wow, yeah.
You aren't just protecting a piece of software, you are galvanizing your user base.
Right.
It transforms casual users into fierce advocates because they can clearly see the founder is willing to risk his own liberty and accept literal exile to protect their data.
A fascinating macro strategy. But you don't get to that level of macro independence without intense daily micro independence.
You have to master your immediate localized environment first.
And that mastery starts right at the source, which is what you actually allow to enter your brain.
Let's look at his information diet because it is incredibly restrictive.
It is wild. For example, he maintains a rigid no phone rule in the mornings. He completely refuses to check his device upon waking.
And even throughout the rest of the day, he barely uses his phone for anything outside of specifically testing new features for his own platform.
It's the ultimate exercise in cognitive defense. The human brain, especially right after waking up, is highly susceptible to external framing.
If the first thing you do is look at a device that feeds you a curated list of global crises, stressful emails, and the curated highlight reels of other people's lives, you have immediately surrendered the direction of your day.
You are in a reactive state, not a proactive state.
Exactly.
I still can't get over the irony of it, though. We are talking about the man who built VK in Telegram.
He is one of the premier architects of the modern social internet.
Right. And yet this same man intentionally aggressively isolates himself from the digital noise he helped pioneer. He vehemently avoids television. He avoids all mainstream news.
And he completely shuns algorithmic social media feeds, the exact mechanisms that power the most addictive apps on the market right now, like TikTok or Netflix.
The irony is certainly rich, but the underlying reasoning is profoundly logical if you understand his worldview.
Why are algorithmic feeds so dangerous in his eyes? Because algorithms, by their very nature, are designed to maximize engagement.
They do this by feeding massive populations the exact same highly stimulating, emotionally charged, often polarizing content.
In his view, when you force an entire society to consume the same inputs, it inevitably leads to the exact same outputs.
It kills independent thought.
It actively breeds a culture of groupthink.
He's employing a strategy of selective ignorance, which I find fascinating. It's a ruthless, unsentimental filtering mechanism.
The guiding rule for him seems to be, if this piece of information does not improve my leverage, or if it doesn't directly serve my overarching mission, it does not get clearance to enter my mind.
He treats his brain like a highly secure air-gapped server. Only authorized data is permitted.
And that framework directly addresses the modern crisis of cognitive bandwidth. We all possess a finite amount of mental RAM, our working memory, and our daily cognitive energy.
When you spend that limited RAM reacting to breaking news alerts about things you cannot control, or scrolling through hours of short-form video dopamine hits, or getting dragged into pointless arguments in comment sections, you literally have nothing left in the tank for deep, complex problem solving.
His minimalism isn't an aesthetic choice to look cool or mysterious. It is a vital functional tool to preserve his mental RAM for strategic long-term thinking.
Let me put this directly to you listening right now. Take a hard, honest look at your own output-to-input ratio.
On any given average Tuesday, how much of your waking time is spent passively consuming the thoughts, the opinions, the dramas, and the creations of other people?
Now weigh that against the time you spend actually generating your own original thoughts, building your own projects, or actively solving the complex problems in your own life.
Are you operating as an active creator of your reality, or have you slipped into being a passive consumer of algorithmic noise?
It's an uncomfortable question for a lot of people to answer.
It really is, and it naturally leads into another core issue, which is, how do you actually build the physical resilience required to maintain that kind of mental fortress?
Because the mind and the body are not separate entities. They are a single, deeply intertwined system. You can't have a sovereign mind in a neglected body.
Right. Which brings us to what we might call the Techno-Monk protocol.
Let's break down the exact physical routines he subjects himself to, because it is intense. Every single morning, without fail, he does 300 push-ups and 300 squats.
That is his baseline before he engages with the world.
And then he hits the gym 5 to 6 times a week for 1 to 2 hours a session.
But here's the thing, he isn't in there trying to build a bodybuilder physique to show off on a beach.
Right, he focuses strictly on weights, cycling, swimming, and he prioritizes endurance and functional capability over sheer aesthetics.
The most revealing part of that routine is the psychology behind those 300 squats and push-ups. When asked about it, he openly admits that he doesn't do them because they represent some perfectly optimized, scientifically flawless fitness routine.
Wait, why does he do them then?
He does them specifically because they are boring.
I need to stop you there. Doing something specifically because it's boring. That sounds completely counterintuitive to the entire optimize your time and hack your productivity mindset we constantly see in the tech world.
It does sound strange at first.
How does wasting his morning on a deliberately boring, repetitive task actually help him run a company?
It's a brilliant question, and it gets to the heart of his philosophy. It's not about the physical exertion, it's about the psychological friction.
Psychological friction.
He views self-discipline as a literal muscle that requires daily tearing and repairing to grow stronger. When you force yourself to do something highly repetitive, physically taxing, and completely mentally unstimulating every single morning, you are actively training your brain to overcome internal resistance.
You are teaching your nervous system that your conscious mind is in control, not your fleeting baseline desire for comfort.
Exactly.
Okay, that actually makes perfect sense. He is intentionally front-loading the friction of his day. He's winning the hardest psychological battle before breakfast.
And speaking of extreme physical friction, let's talk about his recovery methods because they are brutal.
He relies heavily on cold exposure and the traditional Russian banya.
We're not just talking about a warm room at the local gym. A proper banya involves intense, sweltering heat, sometimes involving being struck with birch branches to increase circulation.
Followed immediately by submerging the body in freezing icy water.
The underlying biological mechanism he is exploiting here is called hormesis.
Hormesis. This is a crucial concept to understand his entire lifestyle.
Hormesis is the biological phenomenon where brief, intense, and strictly controlled bursts of severe stress actually force the organism to adapt and grow stronger.
Submerging your body in freezing water triggers ancient survival mechanisms. It reduces systemic inflammation, spikes adrenaline, and most importantly, it creates a massive, sustained regulation of dopamine.
It effectively resets your biological baseline of pleasure and effort, making the normal stresses of running a company feel incredibly manageable by comparison.
It's controlled trauma to prevent uncontrolled trauma. Fascinating. Now let's pivot to his sleep schedule, because this completely upended my expectations.
In a tech sector where hustle culture is essentially a religion, he treats sleep as an absolute uncompromising priority.
He aims for 11 to 12 hours a night. Think about that for a second. 11 to 12 hours.
Let's contrast that with the stereotypical tech CEO.
The standard dogma is some guy on Twitter bragging about sleeping 4 hours a night on a beanbag chair in the office, surviving on espresso shots, and treating sleep deprivation as a badge of honor.
And here he is running a globally dominant messaging empire, intentionally going offline for half of his life to rest.
In the current corporate climate, demanding 12 hours of sleep is practically viewed as professional suicide.
But he views it as the ultimate competitive advantage. He utilizes this massive block of time for a practice he refers to as reflective wakefulness.
It isn't just about being unconscious for 12 hours.
He claims that some of his absolute best, most breakthrough ideas regarding platform architecture and strategy come to him while he is lying awake, resting completely disconnected from all external stimuli.
He absolutely refuses to borrow time from his sleep schedule to squeeze in a few more emails.
He fundamentally understands that chronic sleep deprivation is cognitive suicide. It destroys executive function, emotional regulation, and creative problem solving.
So we have this architectural approach to sleep and exercise. But that discipline extends even further into what he puts, or rather what he flat out refuses to put into his body.
This is where the monk part of the Techno-Monk moniker really solidifies. Let's look at the 7 things rule.
Yes. The sources outline a very specific, inflexible list of 7 things he has given up entirely.
And we aren't talking about a trendy 30-day detox or a New Year's resolution. He has maintained this absolute zero-substance lifestyle since he was 11 years old.
Age 11. That is staggering.
Yeah.
Most 11-year-olds can't go a day without candy, and he made a lifelong pact of asceticism.
Okay, let's list these 7 things.
1. Alcohol. Completely gone.
2. Meat. He eats a plant-based or sometimes pescatarian diet.
3. Pills and pharmaceuticals. He avoids modern medicine unless it is a life-or-death absolute necessity, preferring the body to heal itself.
4. Caffeine. No coffee, no tea, no energy drinks.
5. Fast food and processed sugar.
6. Television and social media, as we discussed.
And 7. Nicotine or any recreational drugs.
And you have to pair that list of restrictions with his dietary schedule. He practices highly rigorous intermittent fasting.
On a normal day, he typically eats only 1 or 2 meals within a narrow 6-hour window, meaning his body is in a fasted state for the remaining 18 hours.
And the materials note that he will frequently engage in extended water fasts, sometimes going without food entirely for weeks at a time to trigger deep cellular autophagy.
I want to dig into the biological claims he makes based on this protocol because they are incredibly bold.
According to his own accounts, he claims he hasn't had a single cold in 15 years.
And even more profoundly from a psychological standpoint, he claims he hasn't experienced a depressive episode in over 2 decades. Is it really true he hasn't had a cold in 15 years? That sounds biologically improbable for someone who travels internationally.
It certainly sounds hyperbolic, but we have to look at what consistent hormesis, extended fasting, and the total elimination of inflammatory foods actually do to the human immune system.
While saying you've never had a single sniffle might be subjective, the overarching point is that his immune resilience is phenomenally high.
If we unpack the broader philosophy here, it's a total, uncompromising rejection of short-term pleasure in favor of long-term optimization.
There is a quote from him in the sources that summarizes his worldview perfectly. He says, "Your brain cells become paralyzed. Why destroy your most valuable tool for short-term pleasure?"
He doesn't just view alcohol or drugs as bad habits. He views them, along with processed sugar, as literal chemical toxins that actively degrade the operational capacity of his most important asset, his mind.
Think about the daily mechanics of eliminating sugar and caffeine. Most people in the modern workforce rely on a massive cup of coffee just to wake up,
A sugary snack to survive the inevitable 3 p.m. afternoon slump?
and maybe a glass of wine or a beer to come down from the stress at night. They are riding a biochemical roller coaster of intense spikes and crushing crashes all day long.
By eliminating all of those inputs, he creates a perfectly flat, sustained baseline of energy.
Exactly. When you aren't fighting a caffeine crash or battling the brain fog of a sugar coma or dealing with the subtle hangover of a single glass of wine, your ability to sustain unbroken focus on a complex engineering problem or a high-stakes strategic business decision is exponentially higher.
You have decoupled your cognitive output from external chemical inputs.
So I'm going to challenge you again. Think about your own daily dependencies. What is the one specific treat you feel like you absolutely need just to get through a normal Tuesday?
Is it that iced coffee in the afternoon? Is it a piece of chocolate after dinner? Is it mindlessly scrolling through short-form videos in bed to wind down?
What would actually happen if you removed just that one thing? How much of your perceived energy, your mood, or your anxiety is actually just your central nervous system reacting to the constant presence or sudden absence of a mild daily stimulant?
It's a powerful experiment to try, and what's fascinating is how this internal discipline of subtraction naturally bleeds into the external world.
If you relentlessly refuse to put clutter and toxins into your physical body, you are highly likely to refuse to put clutter into your physical environment.
This brings us to the concept of environmental minimalism, or the idea of subtracting to thrive.
Subtracting to thrive. It's such a countercultural idea. The documentation paints a very clear picture of his environment. He owns virtually nothing heavy.
And by heavy, we mean massive physical assets that tie you down and demand your attention.
He owns no real estate. He doesn't own a fleet of yachts. He doesn't own private jets. He vastly prefers the ultimate mobility, the sheer liquid freedom that cash and decentralized assets like Bitcoin provide.
It's one thing to say I wear a black shirt every day, but giving up the concept of a permanent home when you have billions of dollars, that takes a unique level of detachment.
It's a masterclass in reducing decision fatigue. It connects directly to the historical philosophies of asceticism or even the Steve Jobs approach to daily life.
The theory is that every single choice you make in a day, no matter how trivial, from deciding what to eat for breakfast to picking out which shirt to wear to deciding which car to drive, drains a tiny drop from a finite, non-renewable pool of daily willpower.
Right, and that's exactly why he wears a uniform. He has a uniform wardrobe, almost exclusively black clothing. He has entirely automated the mundane process of getting dressed.
By automating his wardrobe, standardizing his meals, and stripping his living environment of anything that requires maintenance or management, he is aggressively hoarding his willpower.
He is saving every single ounce of his daily decision-making capacity for global-scale problems regarding encryption algorithms, geopolitical censorship, and platform architecture.
Furthermore, we have to analyze the profound psychological weight of owning physical assets. He holds a fascinating belief that is explicitly stated in his writings: the more you consume, the less creative you become.
The more you consume, the less creative you become. Let's really dissect that.
When you buy a massive estate, you don't just own the estate begins to own you.
You have to hire staff to manage it. You have to worry about the maintenance. You have to pay property taxes. You have to worry about security systems.
The physical things you own end up demanding your mental bandwidth. By owning nothing heavy, he experiences the profound, almost weightless freedom of having absolutely nothing to lose.
And from a purely strategic defensive standpoint, it makes him incredibly dangerous to his adversaries.
When you don't have massive physical estates, corporate headquarters, or luxury goods tying you to a specific geography or a specific traditional banking system, you become infinitely more difficult to coerce.
If a hostile government threatens to seize his property to force compliance, he simply shrugs because he has no property to seize.
His wealth, just like his platform, is entirely distributed and digital. His minimalism is quite literally a defensive shield protecting his independence.
His lifestyle is his armor. It's brilliant. But this naturally raises a massive logistical question. How does a man who lives like an isolated Spartan monk, who refuses to look at his phone in the morning, actually run a technology company used by hundreds of millions of people around the globe.
It's look at the organizational structure of Telegram because it absolutely defies conventional corporate logic.
It truly does. The records show that Telegram runs with incredibly tiny, almost unbelievably elite teams.
To give you the specific numbers, about 40 core engineers manage an infrastructure of 100,000 servers.
Hold on, 40 engineers for 100,000 servers. How is that technically possible without things constantly breaking and catching fire?
Most tech companies with that kind of global user base have massive, sprawling campuses filled with tens of thousands of employees, layers of middle management, and endless committee meetings.
That staggering ratio is a direct reflection of his personal philosophy scaled up to an enterprise level. He prioritizes absolute uncompromising quality over quantity.
He is ruthlessly committed to automating every single process that can possibly be automated, and he obsesses over micro details.
He intuitively understands the brutal math of scale. When you have nearly a billion active users, a tiny, seemingly insignificant inefficiency, a millisecond delay in a line of code, or a slightly bloated feature multiplied by billions of daily interactions becomes a massive catastrophic drain on server resources and capital.
And his commitment to his underlying mission over sheer profit maximization is staggering. The records note that he actually turned down an estimated 80% of potential platform revenue by flat out refusing to implement targeted advertising and user data exploitation on Telegram.
Let's frame the magnitude of that decision in the context of the modern tech landscape. In today's digital economy, user data is the ultimate currency.
It is the oil of the 21st century.
The entire business model of the internet is based on tracking behavior and selling that profile to the highest bidder.
Refusing to mine that data, refusing to track your users and sell their psychological profiles to advertisers when you have hundreds of millions of them is a radical, almost unheard of act of corporate rebellion.
It is the ultimate example of aligning your business mechanics directly with your stated personal morals, even when it costs you billions.
It takes an incredible amount of psychological fortitude to operate that way, especially when facing the kind of legal and geopolitical threats he constantly navigates.
I found his psychological strategy for handling negative emotions, stress, or despair to be incredibly revealing. His personal mantra is, do first, then feel.
Do first, then feel. This is a fascinating psychological pivot, deeply rooted in action-oriented philosophies like Stoicism.
Most people operate on the reverse principle. They believe they need to feel rested or feel motivated or feel confident before they can take action on a difficult task.
He operates on the exact opposite assumption. He believes that energy and motivation are actually generated through the friction of action, not through passive rest or contemplation.
So when he is faced with a massive localized systemic problem, a legal threat from a state actor, or a cascading technical failure on the servers, he doesn't sit around ruminating on it.
He doesn't go to a therapist to talk about his anxiety regarding the server crash. He executes a solution immediately.
The sheer kinetic energy of the action itself generates the momentum necessary to overcome the paralyzing negative emotion.
Exactly. And this philosophy extends directly into how he manages that tiny elite team of 40 engineers.
He operates by hiring individuals who are objectively, demonstrably smarter than himself in their specific, highly technical domains.
And then he gives them immense, almost frightening levels of autonomy.
This is how he manages to scale a global platform without building a bloated, slow, deeply inefficient middle management bureaucracy.
He empowers the top 0.1% of global talent to act immediately, trusting them to execute just like he does.
But let's bring this back down to earth and be brutally realistic for a second. Living like an ascetic monk, plunging yourself into freezing water, eating one meal a day, owning no permanent home, and running a global communications empire that is constantly under threat from powerful state actors, this is not all sunshine and neat little productivity hacks.
This lifestyle has massive, undeniable, and sometimes deeply painful drawbacks.
It is vital that we provide a balanced, critical look at this because the materials themselves are very clear this lifestyle is extreme.
It is highly isolating by design. It requires a level of relentless stoicism that makes what the rest of us would call a normal social life exceedingly difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah, you can't exactly go out for beers and a slice of pizza with your friends on a Friday night to blow off steam if your inflexible rule is 0 alcohol, 0 carbs, 0 sugar, and you absolutely must be in bed for 12 hours of reflective wakefulness.
You are fundamentally cutting yourself off from the shared rituals of human bonding.
Precisely. Extreme discipline, if it isn't carefully monitored, can very easily tip over into harmful, alienating rigidity.
The intense, deliberate isolation required to maintain that level of sovereign thinking, to constantly shield yourself from every possible external influence, can severely limit meaningful, warm human relationships.
Furthermore, as the historical records point out, he faces intense public scrutiny, constant draining legal battles across multiple jurisdictions, and the immense psychological burden of constantly having to choose courage over comfort. It is a heavy, heavy cross to bear.
So let's shift the conversation to practical application. We've laid out the extreme version. But how can you, the listener, take the Durov formula, which we can loosely define as radical minimalism plus intense physical discipline plus intellectual independence plus emotional control equaling sovereign thriving?
How can you apply the best parts of that formula to your own life without alienating your entire family and moving into an empty cave?
The key here is adaptation, not strict replication. The first actionable step we can extract from his framework is start small.
Do not try to delete your entire digital footprint. Throw your television in a dumpster and move to a foreign country this afternoon. That level of sudden shock will just lead to a psychological crash and a massive rebound.
Instead, start with a single, highly controlled daily physical ritual. Maybe it's adding just 60 seconds of freezing cold water at the very end of your normal morning shower.
Maybe it's adding a strict routine of morning reps, just 20 push-ups before you allow yourself to check your phone.
Or maybe it's simply establishing a consistent, non-negotiable 12-hour fasting window overnight to give your digestive system a break.
Okay, that covers the physical entry points. What about the philosophical side of the equation?
The second vital step is to identify your non-negotiables. You need to spend time building your own personal compass of values.
What are the specific things, the moral red lines, that you will absolutely not compromise on, even if holding the line costs you money, social status, or daily comfort?
Once you clearly define those non-negotiables, all the other micro decisions in your life become exponentially easier.
I love that. Define the boundaries.
Right.
And to actually back up those values, to give them teeth, you need leverage, which leads to the third actionable step: build an FU fund.
You need a baseline of financial autonomy. Begin aggressively saving money, not so you can buy luxury goods to impress people you don't like, but to buy your own freedom.
You need to stockpile enough resources so that you have the literal capability to walk away from a toxic job, a bad relationship, or a morally compromised situation without facing immediate financial ruin.
Money in this framework isn't for buying things, it's exclusively for buying independence.
And finally, practice a localized version of digital asceticism. You don't have to throw your smartphone into the ocean, but you absolutely must reclaim ownership of your attention.
Start by cutting out just one distracting app that you know deep down is a pure, unadulterated time sink.
Strictly enforce a rule to avoid the morning phone check. Give your brain the first uninterrupted hour of the day to wake up on its own terms, free from external framing.
And explicitly schedule daily quiet time entirely away from all screens and inputs to allow for actual independent thought to surface.
Okay, let's pull all of these threads together and bring it home. We've covered a massive amount of ground today, exploring the life, the oddities, and the overarching philosophy of this fascinating figure.
And if I had to summarize the ultimate unifying takeaway from everything we've unpacked, it's this: thriving in the truest, most sovereign sense of the word is almost always achieved through subtraction, not addition.
It is not about acquiring more life hacks, downloading more productivity apps, buying more gadgets, or accumulating more stuff.
It is entirely about ruthlessly removing the noise, actively cutting the physical and digital dependencies that tether you, and clearing away the constant clutter of modern life.
It's about stripping everything away until all that is left is pure clarity, raw discipline, and unshakable purpose.
It is a profound, incredibly challenging shift in perspective. It goes against everything consumer culture tells us.
And to leave you with a final lingering thought to ponder on your own after you finish listening today. Take a long, hard look around at your own life, your daily routines, and the habits you've formed.
What is one specific modern convenience or daily comfort that you are fiercely clinging to right now that is actually functioning as a subtle, invisible form of control over your attention, your energy, or your future?
That is a brilliant, slightly uncomfortable question to end on. Thank you so much for joining us on this extensive deep dive into a truly radical, uncompromising way of life.
We hope it sparks some independent, unalgorithmic thoughts of your own.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.